The doors are locking. Behind the heavy oak of the Roosevelt Room and the secure lines of the Situation Room, a silent panic has shifted into a mathematical alarm. They are telling you the economy is stable. They are telling you the path forward is clear. They are lying. This is not a theory. This is not a partisan talking point. This is the cold, hard reality of a system reaching its breaking point. A story broke just hours ago that changes everything we thought we knew about the next 12 months. It is Saturday, February 21st, 2026, and the clock has officially started ticking on what insiders are calling the $300 billion trap. I am your host, and you are watching Analysis with AG, and today we are going to strip away the narrative and look at the raw data that the algorithm wants to bury. According to explosive reports from Reuters, confirmed by multiple high-level sources within the administration, President Trump's own inner circle is pleading with him to stop. These aren't his political enemies. These aren't the mainstream media critics or foreign bureaucrats. These are his own economic architects, the people who built the platform he ran on, and they are telling him that the war he is currently entertaining will not just be a military engagement. It will be an economic suicide note. The great divorce between the military's objectives and the reality of the American household is finally here. One senior advisor was quoted as saying the boss is getting fed up. The patience has evaporated. There is now a 90% chance of kinetic action within the next few weeks. 90%. That isn't a guess. That is an insider assessment from someone who sees the polling, someone who hears the briefings, and someone who knows that the authorization codes are already being prepared despite the flashing red lights on the economic dashboard. In the next 30 minutes, I'm going to show you the exact math of this $300 billion calculation. I am going to show you why the vault is empty and why the very people Trump trusts to manage the economy are currently in a state of absolute terror. Reuters reported that Trump has ordered a massive buildup of forces, preparations for a multi-week air campaign that would be the most aggressive action against the Islamic Republic since the 1979 revolution. But there is a void where the explanation should be. The American public hasn't been told the why or the how. They've only been told that foreign policy has now topped the agenda, completely overshadowing the very issues that put this administration in power: the cost of living, the price of eggs, the rent, and the gas. Issues voters care about are being sacrificed on the altar of a conflict that his own team says will cost billions and trigger a global chain reaction. Let's look at the components of the trap. Nobody in the mainstream media is adding these numbers together because they don't want you to see the total sum. They want to keep the costs fragmented so you don't realize the magnitude of the disaster. Component 1. Direct military spending. You cannot move 2 carrier strike groups, hundreds of combat aircraft, and thousands of support personnel without burning through capital at an atmospheric rate. Israeli defense economists who have been modeling a similar operation for years estimate a multi-week campaign would cost $20 to $25 billion for a smaller force. The American operation is exponentially larger. We are talking about B-2 bombers flying from Diego Garcia, continuous sorties, and a logistics tail that stretches across the globe. Pentagon sources are saying the full force will be ready by mid-March. When you factor in munitions, fuel, personnel, and base operations, the starting price tag is $50 billion. That is just the entry fee. That doesn't buy you a victory, it only buys you the first few weeks of the fire. But the military cost is a drop in the bucket compared to component 2, the oil price spike. This is where the trap snaps shut on the throat of the American consumer. Brent crude is already creeping up, closing Friday at $89 a barrel. The war premium is building, but it hasn't even begun to peak. If the strikes begin and the Strait of Hormuz experiences even a minor disruption, we aren't looking at $90 oil. We are looking at $130 to $150 per barrel. We have seen this movie before in 1973 and 1979. The history is there, yet we are choosing to ignore it. At $130 a barrel, the math becomes catastrophic. The American economy consumes 20 million barrels of oil every single day. If you add a $40 war premium to every one of those barrels, you're looking at $2.6 billion in extra costs every 24 hours. Over a year, that is $292 billion. Add that to the $50 billion in direct military costs, and you are already at $342 billion. That is the minimum. That assumes the war only lasts a year. It assumes the oil returns to normal. It assumes the algorithm of global trade doesn't completely fracture. This is the definition of a trap. Now, let's talk about what happens to your savings, your retirement, and your future. Component 3, the stock market crash. Financial analysts are already whispering about a 3,000-point drop in the Dow the moment the first missiles are launched. The S&P 500 is projected to lose at least 7% in the opening days. The Nasdaq will likely be worse. 7% of the total U.S. stock market capitalization might sound like a small number until you realize the total market cap is approximately $50 trillion. 7% of $50 trillion is $3.5 trillion of wealth destroyed overnight. That is not a typo. $3.5 trillion wiped from 401ks, from pension funds, and from the savings accounts of the very people who were promised economic stability. This is the great divorce in action, the separation of political ambition from the financial security of the middle class. Component 4 is the return of the dragon, inflation. Currently, the consumer price index is running at 4%. It's high, but it's manageable. But you add a $130 oil spike to that equation, and the Federal Reserve models show inflation jumping by another 2 to 3 percentage points. We're talking about a CPI of 7%. Gas prices will exceed $6 a gallon across the country. Heating costs will double. Food prices, which are already a pain point for every American family, will surge another 20% because of transport and fertilizer costs. Trump won his re-election on the promise to kill inflation. This war brings it back with a vengeance. It contradicts every core message of the campaign. It is a betrayal of the economic mandate. And finally, component 5, the global recession trigger. Economic modeling shows that sustained oil prices above $120 act as a tax on global growth. Europe will enter recession first, followed by Asia, and then the United States. Recession means GDP contraction, rising unemployment, and business failures. Tax revenues will decline while the federal deficit explodes to fund the $50 billion war operation. It is a fiscal catastrophe. This is the $300 billion trap at its most conservative estimate. If you include the market crash and the recession, the total economic impact easily exceeds $1 trillion. But even at the $300 billion floor, it is politically terminal. History proves that voters do not forgive economic crashes in election years, and we are heading straight into a midterm cycle that is already looking like a minefield. I need you to understand why the advisors are panicking internally. They're looking at the polling data, and it is a horror show for the administration. Voters have made it clear cost of living is the priority. It isn't even close. They want lower gas prices and lower grocery bills. They do not want a multi-week air campaign against a country most of them couldn't find on a map. Trump won on an America First platform that promised to avoid these costly foreign entanglements. This war would be the ultimate great divorce from his own base. The midterms are only 9 months away. A war beginning now means the economic pain will peak exactly when voters are heading to the polls. It is the worst possible timing. Republicans are already expected to lose seats. That's the historical pattern. But an Iran war plus an economic crash plus broken promises, that is an electoral extinction event. The advisors know this. They are urging him to focus on the economy, but the president is getting different advice from different corners. He is being told that backing down makes him look weak. He is being told that he has already deployed the hardware, he has already made the threats, and if he doesn't act, his international credibility is gone. It is a choice between looking weak on the world stage or triggering a $300 billion economic trap at home. His instincts, the ones that build his career, favor the demonstration of strength. But those same instincts are now pushing him toward a mistake that could dwarf everything he has achieved. Let's name names. According to reports from CNN and Axios, Jared Kushner is leading the faction that wants a deal. He spent hours in Geneva trying to negotiate a nuclear agreement. He believes the economic costs of war are simply too high. He's arguing for diplomacy, for time, and for patience. But his influence is being countered by a much louder voice. Prime Minister Netanyahu was at the White House last week, and he didn't come to talk about the economy. He came with a target list, 73 specific locations. He is telling the president that Iran has never been weaker and that now is the time to strike. It is a battle for the president's ear, Kushner's economic warnings versus Netanyahu's security demands. American prosperity versus Israeli security. The president has to choose, and right now the military pressure is winning. Steve Witkoff, the special envoy and real estate mogul, has also been pushing for a deal. He was in Geneva with Kushner. They think they made progress, but progress isn't a signed agreement. There are massive gaps, and Iran has yet to submit a written proposal that meets the 4 deliverable requirements Trump has set. Time is running out. If that proposal doesn't arrive in the next few days, the advice of the economic faction becomes irrelevant. The authorization will become inevitable. Other advisors, unnamed in the reports but clearly present, are watching the polling and seeing the same disaster looming. They see the America First promise being shredded. They see a war that has no clear objective beyond punishment. And they know that punishment will be paid for by the American taxpayer in the form of $6 gasoline. The pattern here is terrifyingly familiar. Insiders say this reminds them of the decision-making process during the Maduro crisis or the previous Iran strikes. Trump vacillates. He goes back and forth for weeks, polling everyone he talks to, hearing different advice, and then suddenly he decides. The authorization usually comes just hours before the operation begins. The economic advisors often find out it's over when the military starts moving. That is what they are afraid of right now. They're presenting the data, they're showing the charts, and they are hoping the president's political instincts override his military ones. But the boss is getting fed up. The buildup is complete. The carriers are in place. The B-2s are fueled. The hardware creates its own momentum, a gravity that pulls even the most reluctant leaders toward conflict. Look at the words the president used on Friday. He said Iran better negotiate a fair deal or bad things will happen. That isn't the language of diplomacy. That is the language of an ultimatum. He gave a 10-day deadline. That puts the decision point between March 1st and March 6th. We are 8 days away. 8 days until we find out if the miracle deal happens or if the trap closes. The president feels boxed in. He feels boxed in by his own rhetoric, boxed in by Netanyahu's expectations, and boxed in by the sheer amount of military force he has positioned in the region. To back down now, without a massive concession from Iran, would be seen as a retreat. And if there is one thing we know about this president, it is that he hates to look like he is retreating. But what about the people who put him there? Let's look at the electoral math, because this is where the truth-teller persona has to be the most brutal. The working-class voters in the Rust Belt, the people who drive the trucks, who work the factories, who live on the edge of the inflation curve, they see the gas pump every single week. When they see $6 a gallon, they don't see strength. They see a betrayal. They see a president who prioritized a foreign conflict over their ability to get to work. The retirees on fixed incomes who watch their 401ks lose 7% in a week, they won't care about maximum pressure on Tehran. They will care about the $3.5 trillion that just evaporated from the National Retirement Fund. The suburban families paying double to heat their homes, they will notice the great divorce immediately. These are not the voters Trump has already lost. These are the voters he needs. These are the people who gave him a second term because they believed he would protect their wallets. If he triggers this trap, he hands the House and the Senate to the Democrats on a silver platter. The math is simple. Republicans have a 9-seat majority in the House. Historically, the party in power loses 30 seats in the midterms. If you add an economic crisis to that, the loss could be 50 or 60 seats. The Senate is even more precarious. If gas is $6 in November, Republicans lose Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Nevada. The legislative agenda will be dead. The investigations will begin. The presidency will be effectively over 2 years early. This is the catastrophe the advisors are trying to describe. They remember 2003. Many of these people served in the Bush administration or watched it from the sidelines. They remember how the Iraq War began with a rally round the flag effect. Bush's approval was at 70%, but as the costs mounted, as the duration stretched, and as the promises of a quick and easy victory faded, the political cost became unbearable. By 2006, the war was a millstone around the Republican Party's neck. They lost everything, and the Iraq War didn't even have the massive oil spike and market crash that this conflict promises. This will be Iraq on steroids with an economic poison pill attached. Trump dismisses the comparison. He thinks he's different. He thinks the outcome will be different, but every president who has ever started a war thought their war would be the exception. History suggests otherwise. History is a graveyard of quick military operations that turned into decade-long economic drains. Wall Street isn't waiting for the first bomb to drop. They are already pricing in the disaster. Look at the VIX, the volatility index. It jumped 15% on Friday. That is the fear index telling you that the smart money is buying insurance. Gold is surging toward $3,500 an ounce. Why? Because gold is the ultimate safe haven when the great divorce happens. Investors are fleeing risky assets. They are dumping stocks and piling into treasuries, anticipating the storm. The Federal Reserve is in an impossible position. If oil hits 130, they have to raise rates to fight inflation. But if they raise rates while the economy is weakening from the war, they trigger a deep recession. It is a heads they win, tails you lose scenario. The Fed cannot save us from this trap. They are just as much a passenger as the rest of us. Think about the industries that will be gutted. The airlines are already on thin ice. If jet fuel costs double, ticket prices will soar 50%. Demand will collapse. We are looking at hundreds of thousands of layoffs in the aviation sector alone. The automotive industry in Detroit, they can't sell cars when gas is $6. Factories will go quiet. The retail sector, the backbone of the American economy, will see a 20% drop in consumer spending as people prioritize food and fuel over everything else. This isn't just a market correction. This is a fundamental restructuring of the American standard of living, all for a conflict that the military hasn't even fully justified to the public. Why does Netanyahu's voice dominate the room? Because for the president, this isn't just about the next 9 months. It's about legacy. He sees Iran as the final boss, the capstone of his foreign policy career. He believes that if he can force a regime change or total surrender, the economic pain will be seen as a temporary price for a permanent historical achievement. But a legacy built on a $300 billion trap is not a legacy of success. It is the legacy of LBJ in Vietnam. It is the legacy of Carter and the hostage crisis. It is the legacy of a leader who lost touch with the very people who gave him his power. The reporting from Reuters is clear. Trump has not laid out a detail to the public. There is no plan for what comes next. If you bomb the Iranian nuclear program, what happens on day 30? What happens on day 90? Iran is not Iraq. It is a country of 88 million people with a fierce sense of nationalism and a massive military capacity for asymmetric warfare. If we enter this trap, there is no easy exit. It becomes a permanent occupation, a permanent drain on the treasury, and a permanent source of inflation. The America First movement was supposed to end the era of nation-building, yet here we are, standing on the edge of the biggest nation-building project in history. The countdown is at 8 days. Every day that passes without an Iranian proposal is another day closer to the authorization. The military hardware is positioned. The BD-2s are at Diego Garcia. The carriers are in the Gulf. The diplomatic deadlines are expiring. The president is polling his advisors, but he is also watching the clocks. He sees the window closing. He doesn't want to look like he was bluffing. He doesn't want to look like the buildup was for nothing. And that, more than anything else, is what makes this trap so dangerous. The algorithm of his own public image is demanding action, even if that action leads to economic ruin. The advisors are watching helplessly. They have presented the data. They have shown the electoral maps. They have explained the oil math. They have done everything but physically bar the door to the Situation Room. But at the end of the day, they don't have the codes. Only one person does, and that person has built a life on doubling down, on refusing to back down, and on believing that he can beat any system. But you can't negotiate with the laws of economics. You can't deal-make your way out of a global oil shortage. The $300 billion trap is indifferent to your personality. It is mathematical. It is inevitable once the first strike is ordered. The Great Divorce is about to be finalized. On one side, you have the military-industrial complex and the foreign policy hawks who want their legacy moment. On the other side, you have the American family, the 401k, the gas tank, and the grocery bill. The president is standing in the middle, and for the next 8 days, he's the only person who can decide which side wins. If he chooses the war, he chooses the trap. He chooses the $3.5 trillion market crash. He chooses the $6 gas. He chooses the midterm catastrophe. If he chooses the economy, he has to find a way to look strong while backing down a feat of political gymnastics that even he might find difficult. This is why you need to be paying attention. The mainstream media will give you the play-by-play of the military movements, but they won't tell you what it does to your bank account until it's too late. They want you to stay in the narrative. I want you to look at the data. We have 8 days to see if the warnings from the truth tellers inside the White House are enough to stop the momentum of the machine. 8 days to see if the America First promise still means anything when it conflicts with the desire for a military win. The vault is empty, the doors are locking, and the algorithm is trying to hide the cost. But the math doesn't lie. $300 billion is the minimum price of admission. The real cost is the future of the American economy. Share this video, comment to Ruth below, and let's make sure this data reaches the people who need to see it before the trap snaps shut. We are watching the most important 8 days of this decade. Don't look away. The Great Divorce is here, and the only way to survive it is to understand the math before the authorization is sent. History is watching. The voters are watching. And the $300 billion trap is waiting. Saturday, February 21st, 2026. The countdown to March 1st has begun. Will he listen to the advisors who built his economy, or will he listen to the voices calling for fire? In 8 days, we will have our answer. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, and keep looking at the data. The truth is in the numbers, even when the leaders refuse to see them. This is Analysis with AG. We'll be here every day of this countdown, tracking the movements, the leaks, and the reality of the trap. Don't let the algorithm bury the truth. Like, subscribe, and stand with us. The next 8 days will define the next 8 years. The trap is set. Let's see if we have the wisdom to walk away.